Hi, I'm Chris Peterson, CEO with RADICL. Thanks today for joining us. Talk about the state of security in the defense industrial base. We've got a great group of guests here to talk about the challenges that this segment faces in terms of addressing cybersecurity and the threats that are coming after them. And to better understand those threats, RADICL conducted a survey a few months back, really trying to understand how the defense industrial base is viewing cybersecurity, what their challenges are, what their concerns are, what class of incidents they've experienced within the past year, how they're looking at CMMC, how they're looking at their outsourced service providers, and other things relevant to their overall cybersecurity program as it pertains to protecting their data and their operations, and ultimately trying to withstand the advances of nation-state level threat adversaries. So today, got four great guests with us. I'd love to have everybody introduce themselves and the company that they represent. Tony, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Good afternoon. Tony Bai. I'm the Chief Solutions Officer at RISCPoint. RISCPoint is a cybersecurity compliance and management firm. We help commercial companies get ready to meet all the various alphabet soup of cybersecurity compliance frameworks and independent assessments and certifications.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Vince, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Vince Petrecca. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Partnerships at PreVeil. Been with PreVeil about 6 years now. Before that, I was about 20 years in the IT and telecom space in a variety of roles. And PreVeil itself, based in Boston, Massachusetts, currently has about 1,400 defense industrial-based customers using our encrypted email and file sharing platform to support NIST CMMC controls. So we're one of the leading players in that space, work with many small, medium businesses to help them find a cost-effective, quicker path to full compliance with the new NIST CMMC requirements.
Oh, that's great. Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Romness. I'm VP of Partnerships at IsI Enterprises. I've spent the last 40 years working with government agencies to help them meet their goals securely. Most recently, I was in the public sector CTO office at Cisco, and I was the main point of contact for NIST. I like to say when they weren't buying anything. So when they were creating policy, I was in there helping them, making sure our technology was taken into account, and actually helping write some of their publications and editing and things like that. I'm a deep believer in best practices and standards, and I feel that they really help all of industry move forward because it drives predictability. So when I used to speak at large conferences for Cisco and to leaders of organizations, it was inevitable that someone would say, well, hey, I'm a small business. Can you help me? And we really weren't focused on that in my old job. So I'm happy to be at a place where we're a specialized MSP that focuses on helping our customers meet and maintain their DoD requirements, including CMMC. We have vetted and proven processes that we use, and we do them over and over again. So we like to say we hold the hands of small and medium DIB customers when they are working with DoD. And we have a side business or another part of our business where we actually help their facility security officers meet their requirements for facility and personnel clearances. So thanks.
Excellent.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Peter. And then, last and certainly not least, we're lucky to have Chris Leslie with us, representing actually a DIB company building very cool AI tech that helps the modern fighter pilot. So, Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so my name is Chris Leslie. I'm the CIO here at RADICL. I like to still consider us a startup, but we're quite large with 3 sites. We're doing exactly as Chris said, creating a really cool platform that trains fighter pilots in the aircraft using AR technology and anything that surrounds that, including mission briefing and debriefing. Started out with a company about 4 years ago. We've grown from about 5 people to a little over 100 now. And as a lot of you have mentioned, a lot of the things that we need to comply with in terms of being CMMC compliant and all the other alphabet soups of compliance metrics that are out there, it's difficult for a company our size to acquire some of these big enterprise applications at a scale that's not around 5,000. So really grateful to be here and be talking with you guys.
Nice. Thanks, Chris. All right. Well, let's move on to kind of our first domain area to talk about, which is the current cybersecurity program, of DIB companies. So maybe we'll start with, personally, I co-founded RADICL because I have a belief that a lot of American companies are being targeted by nation-state threat actors for the purpose of industrial espionage and cyber warfare. I don't like that. Help do a better job for America and our allies. And I tend to think a lot of companies are likely actively compromised right now if they have interesting technology, for their nations. And I'd be curious, your thought on what do you think the state of cybersecurity is for the defense industrial base, especially those DIB companies that are creating bleeding edge tech. Chris, who wants to tackle this one?
Yeah, I'll start. I'm sure others will jump in, but I thought that the study you guys did on the state of cybersecurity in DIB was very interesting. And what it showed to me was that we are progressing. A couple of years ago, a lot of the questions, there would have been a lot less progress that you'd see. People are realizing the importance of cybersecurity, and they're starting to act on it. The other thing I see is that, there's still a big need there. And I think the idea is that folks in the DIB are interested in achieving their mission. And cybersecurity is not part of the mission. It's an enhancer to the mission. It enables the mission. And so I think that we're slowly seeing the focus and the need for cybersecurity be realized.
That's an interesting take. Coming from the DIB side, we knew long ago that CMMC was going to be a part of everyone's framework back when it was CMMC at the time 1.0. As we were going through and vetting different vendors for helping us get compliant or at least start down the path of compliancies, what we found a lot of times is people would get on the phone and say, oh, you guys are thinking about this now. There's a lot of other companies that aren't. So I'm happy to hear that a lot of companies are starting to really think about it. But I still do think, based on some of the conversations I've been having lately, that the pickup for getting compliant, or at least thinking about compliance around cybersecurity and just any of the other frameworks still needs to be, there's a lot to be desired.
I would say that the DIB is still probably in the crawl phase of the crawl, walk, run aspect, right? Before, cybersecurity compliance was always a lip service and more seen as a kingdom of no, of why get in our way of how to do things, right? Where I think the DoD and the DIB starting to realize that cybersecurity is a necessary part. And like, as Peter said, it's a force multiplier. It's something that has been near and dear to my heart since my entire 22-year career in the Air Force as a cyber warfare SME for the Air Force. It's about protecting the data, right? It's providing that national security of everything that we're doing, but actually putting teeth behind it and holding actual people accountable for it. And companies are now starting to realize it's not a silver bullet, just buy this latest piece of technology, installed in your infrastructure, and you're good. It's really taking the holistic approach where you're actively thinking about the people, processes, and technology, and how that all comes together to provide a comprehensive cybersecurity program to protect your crown jewels.
Yeah, I used to talk to folks and coach them on the cybersecurity framework from NIST. And I would always point out to them that technology is about 1/3 of all the guidance in the cybersecurity framework. The rest is people, process, and policy. So that's a huge part of a cybersecurity policy or program in an organization.
I feel like we're still in the leading edge. Like the folks that we're dealing with at PreVeil day in and day out are a small segment of the overall DIB. They're the ones who are self-selected, the ones who say, I want to do something, or at least start thinking about doing something now. And I do think that the risk here is that there is a whole latent part of the audience here that is holding off, waiting till they've got specific pressure from a customer, a real dire need, because it may start impacting their business before they move. And I'm hoping that changes as part of the overall marketing around, for instance, the CMMC program and the assessments that will be taking place. But I do believe there is still a good portion of the DIB that is still in a bit of a wait and see mode when it comes to adding too much resource around cybersecurity.
Yeah. And I see that too. There's been a lot of false starts with CMMC as a whole, right? There's DFARS, there's a NIST, and then which NIST framework is going to be applied to your particular contract. And then we're going to do it, and then they weren't. And now we're at CMMC 2.0, various levels that have been consolidated, and you have companies saying, okay, well, this is cool, but what about, version 3 or whatever the next version is? I think people are really starting to realize now that this might be serious. We've taken it seriously from the beginning, but there's a lot of other companies that I converse with a lot, and a lot of them are just saying, yeah, we're just going to kick this can down the road and wait until something actually hits, which is unfortunate because I feel like a lot of companies out there are waiting for that to happen. It's just there's going to be a huge groundswell on the technology and the stacks that are available to get people compliant quickly. And a lot of companies are going to be, scrambling to try and find somebody who will work with them because they're going to be working with so many other companies that are larger to get compliance quickly.
Yeah. Agree with all sentiments. One thing I think, I think there's a challenge fundamentally economically in the DIB, and that CMMC will hopefully solve, which is creating a level playing field for mandatory spend. I tend to believe that the fundamental challenge is there's a lot of the DIB, they just have such budgetary constraints that they cannot afford to invest in cybersecurity. Doing cybersecurity well costs money. It takes resources and tools and people. But if you are a company that's been around for 30 years and you don't have a lot of, and your operating margins are pretty, narrow and thin, you don't have venture backing, it's hard to lean in sometimes to the spend that's required to accelerate a program. And if your competitors aren't doing that and you're bidding on the same work, how do you balance that risk versus the economic risk of competitiveness in the marketplace? And I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on just kind of the budgetary considerations around all of this?
I think people or think companies have to realize that, you go back to the foundation of, you have the CIA triad, right? The confidentiality, integrity, and availability. From a commercial aspect, everyone's is out about the availability and integrity. What people need to wrap their minds around is the DoD, especially, it's not about integrity and availability. It's about the confidentiality. It's how you are securing the data.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, to balance that out, CMC is based off of 171. And 171, it was especially designated about protection confidentiality. It doesn't address the integrity or availability of the information. And the fact, if you look at it, I will frankly say those companies that have been in business for 30 years that have kind of looked at cybersecurity as a cost center and not as an advantage to your business, and you've had 30 years to do it, there's not a lot of sympathy within the DoD for them, right? Because a lot of the things that you're asked to implement via 171 controls are basic cybersecurity hygiene that you should have been done and should have been implementing since 171 was implemented back in 2012, 2013. When I was at the Pentagon, when we first released the DODI instructions and the DFARS and all that about 171, we were hoping that everyone talked about, we want to protect the nation. We have this notion of protecting and doing right by our country, but no one did it. And that's why we're here with CMMC.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, CMMC, this idea of CMMC really drives the ability of people to know that they're doing the right things, right? It lays out that you should do these things. And so it kind of gives a roadmap to everybody, and it levels the playing field amongst all of the folks that, once you say you're audited that you are CMMC compliant, then, if you're one of the first ones there, it becomes something that you can use as a differentiator for yourself. And I'll tell you, it's a lot cheaper to implement these controls than to suffer the consequences of something bad happening.
Yeah, Chris, your own report says, was it some 60% of the cyber incidents have cost companies $100,000 or more?
Yeah, that's meaningful. That's right.
A lot. Yeah, real dollars. And I'm not saying that it's easy or anything like that. It's where there's finally some teeth behind it, right? So everyone was kind of, in terms of the military, they pencil whipped this, right? Oh yeah, we beat it. Whether they truly did or not, companies are saying that they did. Now you're actually being held accountable to proving what you say you're doing.
I see that as the promise of CMMC, is that there's actually teeth in it. There's going to be independent auditing, and that should hopefully set everybody at the same economic baseline of spend that then gets baked into the procurement process, so that some can ignore it and underbid those who are investing in it and may find themselves at risk of being uncompetitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a DIB CEO, you have to consider that, I would imagine, in terms of just budget allocation against against commercial risk of am I going to be priced right?
And don't discount the fact that if you're in an organization and you're the person that's trying to sell this idea internally, having something like a CMMC as a tool that says, look, we have to do this. This is important to our customer. Don't undersell that. And also getting back to how you open this webinar, Chris, is, this is for the good of all of our nation, really. I mean, it's a bigger mission than just each individual DIB person. The number of jobs and intellectual property that are fleeing this country because of it is huge. I mean, so you can use all of those as your cudgel internally.
I'll be first to say too, like everyone else, like CMMC, the 801.853, all those various frameworks. It's compliance, and compliance isn't security, right? What it is a way to document and outline how you are implementing security and ensure that it's comprehensive enough to cover the various aspects that are relevant to the protection of your data and to the nation's data.
Yeah, and just kind of piling onto that, going back to the cost and budget allocations for smaller companies like RISC and the journey along the CMMC and all the other frameworks, we looked at it as an opportunity to build it right from the start. So when CMMC and FARS and NIST came out, for me, it was the perfect opportunity to get basically a cheat sheet into how to set up a secure framework for the entire company. And luckily, because we have a lot of Air Force or ex-Air Force pilots at the top, it was an easy decision to make in terms of compliance and allocating spend in order to get where we needed to be. In addition to that, a lot of people think that, this is a huge undertaking and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. While in some cases it does, we found that once you have an active program or a project and you have some time with the government, there are a lot of tools that are available from any three-letter agency that you can think of that make it easier for you to get compliant, or at least give you the tools and resources to get as close to being compliant as possible without spending very much at all.
Yeah, in regards to budget, Chris, I'll just mention that what we're seeing is that if you want to save on your budget for instance, for NIST CMMC compliance, start earlier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The later you start, the bigger your budget's going to need to be. You're going to have less time. You're going to have fewer options. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to outsource more of it. So the best thing to do if you want to keep the cost down, get started now, plan it over a period of 12 months or 18 months, however much time you believe you'll have, as opposed to waiting the last minute when it will certainly be more expensive.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually a really, I think, good segue into the next topic of area, which is outsourced service providers. I think a lot of companies, have outsourced service providers and will likely consider them, as they look to achieve or accelerate their CMMC journey. I thought I would just, maybe just start with just kind of getting a level playing field around the types of providers, what they're known as, and what they do. And I think there's, likely some confusion at times in the market around an MSP versus an MSSP versus an MDR. And anybody want to take a crack at maybe differentiating those, three different acronyms and providers?
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, there's a typical thing of, just in a very high level layman's terms, MSSP is your general outsourcing of IT operations in general, right? It's all of it. It's all encompassing. It's not necessarily centered around cybersecurity. And that's kind of where the MSSP comes in, right? That's where it's a outsourced service centered around cybersecurity. And then obviously from there, you can have an MSP and an MSP, or the MSP provides MSP services. And then the same thing going from the MSSP is just the MDR is the more specialized, where it centers around threat vulnerability, incident response, things of those nature. So you have more of the broad range down to a smaller specific cybersecurity, down to a specific aspect of cybersecurity. That's really the difference between the three.
And it might help, MDR is managed detection and response. Yeah. MSP is managed service provider. MSSP is managed security service provider.
Yeah, I think that was appreciate that, Peter, and Tony. That's a good, I think, good distinction between the three. So one question: so as companies begin to think about if they're evaluating outsourcing, are there things they might think about when choosing a partner? And finding the right partner in terms of how to fill some of those gaps through a third-party provider.
Yeah. So Tony mentioned that there's different subsets, and some can do some and some can do others. So I think the first question you need to ask is, what are your capabilities? Are you just an MSP? Do you provide security services also? How much more do they cost if you do that? How about detection and response? Do you have a cybersecurity focus? Things like that. So you really want to understand the capabilities and the costs that you're looking at.
Yeah, and just to pile on, just because we're on the other side and we're usually the guys looking to employ these types of systems, some of the things that we ask for and think about as we go through in the vetting process is, what is the stack of software that they use? Does that fold into what we're currently using? Do we have something that is complementary to what they're using or in conflicting? Where do we want to make the decision? And then overall, if they're going to be watching systems, they're probably going to need some kind of tie-in or a look into peer into our environment. So looking at them as a possible proxy for unscrupulous individuals getting into our network and causing havoc because the MSSP, the MDR, the MSP doesn't have their security stuff up to snuff.
Yeah, just like all of the CMMC rules flow down from the prime to the subs, I think you need to look at your vendors as your subs, and that the things that you need to do have to flow down to your sub.
And I would say the big thing is like it's doing the whole buyer beware thing, doing the proper vetting and establishing trust with your potential partner that's going to act as MSSP, MSP, or whatever. The big thing that I would say, which I think may be a little bit controversial, is when you encounter a company that says they do everything and they do everything well, to me, it's a red flag, right? Because for any of these companies, I think Chris and Vince, you guys, with RADICL and PreVeil, you would agree. The more you specialize, the better you're at it. Anyone that says they know everything all at once, no one knows everything about cybersecurity,
Well,
right?
and
That's the fundamental hard part for the SMBs is no one has that all-arching expertise in every aspect of it. And if you do find something like that, you can't afford them. No one can afford them. They're the ones that are opening their own companies and doing this stuff, right? So
yeah, I think it's pretty easy to find somebody who says they will do it. It's just figuring out who actually can do it well.
Right.
Yes.
Vince, get some thoughts on that?
I was going to say, if you're going to outsource a key functions like these, right, you want expertise. You're not looking to do this just to have someone do it. So what you want to do is assure that they have real expertise in that space. And if you're someone, just for example, that's now looking at an MSP or an MSSP, and you're a CMMC level 2 candidate, you need to be preparing for that. Then you need to make sure that your MSP is prepared for that as well, for instance. And if they're not, being sure that you're going to insource those components of that support that you need to make sure you can stay compliant. So that has to be a factor as you consider external outsourcing in this new CMMC world.
Yeah. So I'd recommend looking at a sample of the statement of work from the MSP or MSSP or whoever. We talked about security being a team sport and that there's a lot of policy and process that goes along with it. And if you have someone saying that they're going to do everything for you, that should be a red flag, because there are things that only the company that is doing, the hiring company can do. Pushing policies and processes in your own organization is important. Should your MSP or MSSP be suggesting things and being your counsel? Yes, but they can't do everything for you. And if they think they can, that should be a red flag.
Absolutely. What we've done, or my philosophy with a lot of this stuff is, the best person to come up with how the company should operate functionally, cybersecurity or otherwise, needs to create the policies. And then the policies that are written internally should influence the stack and the support that goes along with that stack. So, creating what we need and how our machines operate and how people interact with the data that we're protecting should be a rubric for the MSSPs or whoever is going to be assisting with watching the stack. And, like what you guys were saying, anyone who says they do everything, question it, scrutinize it. And even when they say this is specifically what they do, what we like to do is pull that apart even further and go into the specific stack, what they're going to be touching, how they're going to be touching it, what the data flow looks like, logging, and everything that goes along with the services that they're providing. And usually people fall apart and we just walk away from them.
And I would say check references.
Yeah.
And I would say too is how transparent or upfront they are about their capabilities. Like, for example, Chris, I'm sure you'd appreciate, like, there are companies that can do it all, but it's normally not all in-house. What they'll be very upfront is like, we have technology partners or partners that can do this aspect, and we can kind of act as that project or program manager to help provide all these services for you. And those that are willingly or readily say, like, this is not a strength, we can do it, we can find partners for you. But, being honest with their capabilities really is what it is. And that, again, that comes down to establishing trust with you.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great in terms of stack. I think it's very important. And I think also digging into the people behind the stack as well. If you can get there in terms of what team they've assembled, how they're built, who's actually doing the work on your behalf, their qualifications are, because, specialization is required, and especially in some of the higher level security functions. And these are hard people to go out and to recruit and to retain. Great stuff. Let's move on to kind of pivoting back a little bit to CMMC. We talked a bit about this already, but we touched on this. But this is kind of a question that this is a curious one. And Tony, you're referring to this. We've had NIST 800-171. We've had DFARS clauses that came out that required compliance with. Then that required reporting your self-assessment score to SPRS. These things have been in place. CMMC level 2 is aligned. Is NIST 800-171 Rev 2. A lot of people, we kind of found there's a lot of people saying, we're good to go on NIST, and we're preparing to get ready for CMMC level 2. And there's like a kind of a fundamental disconnect here. So I guess anyway, I guess we kind of know the answer, but if NIST has been there already, and then the requirement's been there, and CMMC level 2 is coming, why was CMMC introduced, and why is this disconnect out there, do you think?
I would say it's more because when it first came out, it was self-attestation, right? And people, and I'm not ascribing any sort of maliciousness to it or willful ignorance, but it does come down to ignorance and not having the expertise, understanding what those controls are asking for, right? And there was no set level of competency or compliance with those controls. So 171 allowed you to have poems, allowed you to have findings and document those findings. The problem is there was never any follow-up of, are you fixing those findings?
Right.
Or the people that would optimistically interpret their efficacy of the controls that they put in place, right? And that's kind of where we come into. Or the fact that they're not taking it from a holistic security approach. I mean, for example, look at like the, way back when the Target issue with the POS systems and the hack, because they got access through an HVAC system that was, for whatever reason, tied into their point of sale system. It's taking that realistic look of your CUI environment, like for 171's CMC, of understanding where all that data is and why it's there. Is there a legitimate reason for it? And then how you're protecting it. That type of emphasis on that was never there with the self-attestation. It was a check the box requirement of, do you attest you're compliant with 171? Yes, to the best of my abilities, we are. And then with CMMC, now we're requiring actual experts, professionals in security and understanding how these things should be implemented and the secondary and tertiary effects, how that applies, right? And then attesting to it, an independent testament. So there's no unconscious bias about how well you've actually implemented those controls. It's an independent assessment. I mean, that's the reason why almost every cybersecurity framework that has some sort of attestation or accreditation requires independent assessment.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think you also have to remember that the NIST controls are just one of the key aspects in the DFARS 7012 clause. So if you're using a cloud service provider for storage and handling your data, it's more than NIST 800-171. They have to be FedRAMP. They have to meet FedRAMP requirements. They have to meet the FIPS 140-2 requirements. They have to meet incident reporting, media preservation requirements. Most people who say they're kind of have got things together on the NIST side, you ask them where they're storing their content, they'll say, commercial Office 365, or, here on an on-prem server where I really don't have any controls, or Google type of thing. So, I think for some of those folks in education, that the NIST 800 is part of this, and as Tony said, you no longer can have POAMs. That's a big difference going forward. But it's a whole solution here that needs to meet the requirements. Otherwise, you won't be able to assess completely. So that all has to be considered into the plan as you move in the direction of compliance.
Yeah, and Vince, you're saying music to my ears because we love all of the things that you just mentioned, and have been using that as the rubric to build out our stack. We do have, like a lot of other smaller companies, an enclave and a non-enclave, but the enclave influences heavily on the commercial side. So we love, putting out these frameworks because it just makes our lives easier. You don't have to worry about it. And then going back to, people who don't understand the difference between or the lack of difference between 171 and CMMC. A lot of people are like, yeah, I'm 171. Now I'm getting prepared for CMMC. What that usually means is I've done all of the stuff. I just haven't documented it. And in my book, if you're not documenting it, then what are you doing? You can't possibly remember all the controls. There's no way. So why not just do yourself a favor, document it. And then when you're ready for CMMC, 90% of the work is done.
You're saying, oh, that looks good right there. Yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah, the documentation is such a large part of this. As we work with more, just more and more every month, more and more customers around this, the documentation challenge is maybe the single biggest challenge in this whole thing. It really can be. And so we've taken a bit of a focus ourselves to help, certain groups of our customers move faster through that process. It's definitely important. It's definitely a daunting challenge for small, medium businesses, especially.
And we're doing the same thing. We have this established, accepted process that's been through it multiple times. And we just take our customers right through that. So it really gives a predictability of time, a predictability of cost, an assurance that it will be accepted once it's done. So we're seeing really good results in that.
And I think, Chris, you kind of mentioned earlier, it was like there's a lot of them in the DIB that are waiting.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think the cautionary tale there is the fact that they don't understand the lift and the amount of effort required to be ready.
Yeah.
Before I was at RISCPoint, I led a top 3PAO for 4 years, and we were an RPO, and I was actually one of the first C3POs at the prior company and everything else. What people don't understand is if you don't have the documentation, you won't pass the assessment. Everything that you say you must do to a C3PO must be demonstrated through some sort of evidence or artifact. And 90% of it is your policies, procedures, and any sort of deliverables from a change control board review or anything like that, right? If you say you do it, you need to be able to produce evidence that you do. Mm-hmm. And that's where people get caught up because they rely on tribal knowledge of we do it. Well, how do you do it? Well, I don't know. Joe was taking care of it. And that's just not good enough.
That's not going to fly.
I have two philosophies with that. If my first one is if I show up into an audit and I can hold the binder in one hand, then I don't have enough. And the second is if I win the lotto and get hit by a bus, somebody needs to know what I've been doing. So
yes. So I think there's interesting. I think somebody mentioned that waiting for CMMC will likely cost more, right? So there's a concern around kind of budget allocation, and if you wait, you're likely going to spend more. I think conversely, I think there's a window of opportunity for those who get ahead of it and are first to achieve certification and that attestation of certification, where they're likely there'll be a period where their competitors are not there yet. Do you guys agree with that? I think there'll be a window for kind of lean in companies to use that to accelerate their businesses.
Absolutely,
I do, and in fact, I'll pile on to that. Right now there are 53 C3PAO companies that are authorized to do audit, and most of those are individual or 1 or 2 or 3 people companies, and there are at least 8,000 small, medium businesses that are trying to get this certification, and a whole lot of bigger businesses that are going to need this certification. The certifications take time, and so we are fully expecting a backlog of trying to get an auditor to come in. First you have to get ready, and then the audit takes some time. And so you may, if you act fast and you one of the first early people that do this, then you would have an advantage over the people who may not get certified in time to bid on contracts.
I would equate it to most product companies. First to market gains the greater market share, right? And that's really what it comes down to. Plus, it helps with your differentiating when you bid on contracts or when you're bidding against your other subcontract competitors to the primes. What Peter kind of alluded to, I believe I've already was discussed through the Cyber AB that the JSVA, the Joint Surveillance vulnerability assessments. The DIB assessments that are being done by C3POs now as an interim. They are being limited now to only prime contract holders, where before it was open to anyone that was in as a sub to a contract. So things are cracking down because of the limited number of C3POs. And another aspect of that too is kind of Peter mentioned 8,000. That's including all the market pressure from the primes requiring all their supply chain to become CMC certified, which is outside of the requirements for the actual CMC program. As soon as it goes live, every major prime, the Raytheons, the Northrop Grumman's of the world, and everything else are going to say, "Hey, subs, you need to be CMC certified now, or you won't be one of our vendors."
Yeah, the job of a prime is to push as much responsibility onto their subs as possible.
Yes.
And we're actually already seeing them do that to many of our customers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've seen it too.
Yep. So CEO should be thinking about being first to market with their certification.
And that, by the way, that first to market is not just for your government customers. It's so common to see state and local customers say, "I want FedRAMP," even though they don't have to have it. It's the easy button for them to know that the requirements are being made. And we're seeing financial organizations ask for that type of thing. And so if you can say that your CMMC certification, it gives that extra oomph to your outside of government opportunities.
And it's just not stopping with CMMC. There's C2M2 at Department of Energy, which is based on CSF and 171. There's Canada is implementing it. There's talks with UK and Australia and other departments like DHS and everything else that are requiring 171 based frameworks. And they're using CMMC as the test case on how best to implement.
Yeah, NERC, nuclear energy, homeland security. As you mentioned, Canada now, many other countries looking to go with this as well. We're seeing interest from really around the globe now for this type of security.
Yeah. I think it's somewhat related, in terms of things CEOs, CIOs, IT leaders should be thinking about is, as at least we kind of read the CMMC, in its current form, it would require MSPs and cloud service providers to hold the same level of certification that the company is bound to. That seems like it could be a major shakeup for organizations if their service providers and SaaS products, cybersecurity otherwise, are not at that same level of certification that they need to achieve. What are your thoughts on this area?
Despite what companies may wish for, it's not going to change. Being a FedRAMP 3PO, and have led multiple FedRAMP 3POs, if you're leveraging cloud service offerings, a SaaS or IaaS or PaaS, even for the SMBs, it's going to require that FedRAMP moderate or better, or FedRAMP moderate equivalent per the DoD memo. I will say, as a 3PL, if you can get authorized, do that, because that's more realistic to get than that FedRAMP moderate equivalency with 100% compliance aspect of it.
It's a tough one.
It is a difficult bar, and I know Vince. I've talked to people at PreVeil and everything else, and we're helping them too about how to manage that, and it's hard. And it's a big investment, right? So that's one of the big things too, of things that as a DIB company to ask your potential vendors as well, is if they are leveraging any sort of cloud service offering, is it FedRAMP moderate authorized or not? Because otherwise, the services of them will fail your CMC certification because it won't meet the requirements.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can speak for Chris's team, but we beat the team up quite a bit in the early stages of onboarding RADICL around that exact thing. Where's the data? Who has access to it? Where is it going? And all the FedRAMP, NIST, FIPS questions you can ask, just to make sure that we were good going into what will be a world of CMMC 2.0.
Yeah, and we appreciated the beating there to make sure that we were on the right path. All right, let's move on to on part 4, future strategies and priorities. So as kind of CEOs, CIOs, and DIB leaders think about the future, as they look at, I guess, compliance, maybe more so cybersecurity. What are the investments that you all think they should be maybe prioritizing or thinking about in the next year, to really bolster their defenses?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is that I think there's been a more complete understanding of the benefits of zero trust type environments. PreVeil, for ourselves, we've sort of based many of our system capabilities on zero trust, assuming that there will be attacks, assuming those attacks might be successful. and setting yourself up in a way that still won't reveal any valuable information to an attacker. Part of that for us is using end-to-end encryption. We're big believers in end-to-end encryption versus encryption in transit, encryption at rest. And more systems use that. We believe there'll be many fewer successful attacks out there as well, certainly in the cloud. So those are important. But I would say, we talked a lot about compliance today, and there's sort of this, can you conflate compliance and security? We believe you can. We believe that if you meet these compliance requirements, you will be more secure, right? Yes, there are things you can just go and do and become more secure. Absolutely. But meet the compliance requirements. If you're in the DIB and you have level 1 or level 2 CMMC requirements, go address those first. And if you do, you'll be in a much better posture. And then, of course, you can always add additional security to that as well. But I think you're not going to do too badly if you start with those compliance frameworks.
I'd say look at compliance as a facilitator, it gives you guidance on what you need to do, and it gives you air cover and the drive to do it. And then once you've done it, it gives you protection. So really look at it as a positive. And I'd say that if you're on this call, you're already doing one of the most important things you can do is be aware of it and start developing a plan. Yeah. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to start, figure out where you want to be, and then figure out where you are now and develop a plan to get from one place to your future desired state.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to pile on to what you guys were saying, we, like I mentioned before, like to use the frameworks as a rubric or a cheat sheet for how we should be moving our environment closer to in terms of cybersecurity. Even a split environment should be heavily influenced by security frameworks that are proven that we're going to have to do anyway. So you might as well use them to influence how you capture, move, and work with data in your organization.
I would say a couple things. DIBs need to really concentrate on the basics, right? Because it is about cyber hygiene, understanding where your data is, to understand where it should and should not be, and even discovering places where, I didn't know it went there, but we haven't put any protections in place there. The other aspect, again, as been said, zero trust is going to become a federal mandate. They have zero trust reference architecture, everything. It's an expectation. If you're not planning towards doing it, and I would caution DIBs, zero trust is not a technology solution. It's a paradigm of how you implement your technology stack. And then the other aspect here is just make sure whatever you implement is practical, scalable, and operational for your business. Because if you implement these things just to check the box on a requirement and it is not something that you do in a regular day-to-day basis for your business, it's never going to sustain itself. It's never going to remain in effect. People are going to find the workarounds, right? The best security is something that is transparent to your end user. But it still has to be implemented. So make sure it's operational, that works for your business. If it doesn't, it's just going to be a band that's going to fall off after the first month. It's not something you want to do.
And if you're a small company, and not focused, and cybersecurity is not your main line of business, get help. There's folks out there. Most of us on this call are providers to the small, medium DIBs in the industry. We have processes and policies that we've done that help, and we can give guidance. So I definitely recommend that you don't try and do it on your own. It's not your core business. It's not your core focus. Get proven, trusted, vetted help.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, a few years ago, there may not have been, but now there really are proven, relatively inexpensive solutions here that can help you very quickly improve your compliance posture. So don't go into this thinking it can't be done. I'm just throwing my hands up. I'm not going to do anything because it's too hard. This is a manageable process now. There's options out there for you. They're proven, and you should get started on them because you don't have to throw your hands up in the air. There's options for you now.
That's great, sage advice. One more question on future. I mean, we got to talk about AI, right? I mean, we need to, how is AI gonna maybe be a game changer, or impact all of this within the DIB? Anybody want to jump in on that topic?
We were using AI in many of our tools for the last 5-10 years. We used to call it things like fuzzy matching and things like that, but it was really machine learning and AI. AI is a huge buzzword. I caution people to jump right on the bandwagon. again, take a proven, go with proven solutions that have been shown to work, and be careful of early in market type of solutions that may not have been vetted.
I would say just understand that AI, everyone, if you slap AI, it's going to increase your company value by 20%, right? Whether you're actually using it or not. But that's the cynic in me. But just understand that a lot of your AI implementation is considered a cloud service offering, right? So that means if your AI is not FedRAMP authorized, you can't use it. The other aspect too is understand that AI is only as good as how you train it. So the information you train it, with CMMC and FedRAMP or any of these others, is feeding in how you implement and protect your systems and your operations. That's not something you want to put in the public venue in an LLM. So be wary of using it. Also be wary that it does have limitations. It's bias, and whether it's lying and truthfulness and everything else. I think AI is probably 2 to 3 years out for really viable, at least in the cybersecurity arena, when it comes to more the compliance aspect, right? At this point, I would not trust an AI to write all your policies and procedures. It's a great starting point.
No, but I would trust it to bring things up. I would trust it to bring things up that you need to look at. So,
yes.
Indications of compromise across multiple indicators is something where it's valuable. But making final decisions and sharing any of your data as part of the AI database both of those things are still.
And just understand too, security companies and like the FedRAMP 3 PAOs and C3PAOs, we're all still trying to figure out how best to audit and validate them for use in government frameworks. We're still learning. So it's more of use it as a tool, don't use it as the solution.
Yeah. Chris, we're using it today in our operations to create better solutions for our customers in terms of just the development, the programs, the feature development, how to speed that up, how to make it better. There's a lot we can do in our organization. We're using it on the technical support side, certainly to help more customers faster, those kind of areas. But in terms of AI being in the PreVeil platform for our customers, as Tony said, that's a few years away, because we need to do it in a way that could completely meet security and compliance requirements. And that's first and foremost for our customer base.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I can't NDA all of LinkedIn, so I can't talk about AI.
Fair enough. All right. Well, then we'll move on to our concluding question, and thought to give each of you an opportunity to maybe share kind of one thought around if you're sitting across from a DIB CEO, what might be one piece of advice you'd give them, or one prediction that you might share around what's around the corner for cybersecurity in the DIB.
I would say that Chris was mentioning it before. There's been a lot of delays in some of these compliance programs, CMMC specifically. It appears those are actually behind us now. The content has been fully reviewed. All the comments have been adjudicated. This is now on a path to go for approval in Congress this fall. It is expected to be fully approved. I think there's been only one similar type project in the last 30 years that hasn't been approved. So it isn't like it's almost certain to pass this process. And it will probably be showing up more formally in contracts in spring of 2025. So this is a real thing. If you're still waiting on the sidelines, you don't want to be waiting come spring of 2025.
Yeah, and I'd say my prediction for 25 is CMMC requirements will flow down. They're flowing down from the government, and we're fairly sure that it's going to happen. And we're absolutely sure that when that happens, the primes will flow them down. And it's going to be important for all of you. We're also sure that other government agencies will start looking at them and flowing them down towards you, as well as you may see some commercial customers do it.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go next. My predictions around CMMC and just being compliant are echoing the sentiments of the guys on this call. But for the most part, I think it's going to be around making sure that if you are watching this video or you've heard about it and you haven't done anything, start now. Make a phone call, phone a friend, get on message boards, reach out to your local federal offices for help. It is out there. There's possibilities of it not costing a lot, and it will definitely get you further than where you are now. And if you haven't done anything or even thought about it, you're already behind.
And we're going out to our customers right now. We're able to give them an assessment of where they need to go. We give them a very predictable cost, and we've done it with multiple people. So we're already seeing it work very well for many people.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. All right, Tony, we'll wrap up with you.
I'm going to be a little bit contrary in my predictions here. I feel like, as Vince said, that it's going to go through. CMC is going to happen. It's going to happen according to the timelines that everyone's been hearing about, with the March effective date, things of that nature. What I do think is going to happen is there's going to be a glut because of the limited number of C3POs. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I feel that there's probably going to be an extension of those phases. That transition phase plan is going to be extended out a bit, meaning, that phase 1 is going to be 6 months. I got to feel that's going to be extended out to probably 12 months. Mm-hmm. And then from there on out, the other phases to give the C3PO community time to build up the number of assessors mm-hmm. to conduct these assessments and meet the needs of the industry. I just don't see an operational way or a practical way of meeting that needs with 53 C3POs and some 300 certified assessors, at least right now. I also believe that there's going to be some sort of prioritization plan to come out with like IaaSs and SaaSs or PaaSs or some sort of like MSSPs, MSPs, and MDRs and type things, to where they can really leverage the inheritance aspects of federal cybersecurity to its greatest extent for the DIB.
That's great. Well, Tony, Chris, Vince, and Peter, really appreciate you being a part of this event. And I think, a lot of incredible experience and wisdom shared, and hopefully it'll benefit the defense industrial base companies who are listen to this and can learn from the wisdom shared. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.